Hello everybody and welcome to a brand new Elder Scrolls Online build video with me, Sherman. Today we are going to be covering the return of the Stormbreaker build. So the Stormbreaker is a stamina decay build made for dungeons, open world, and trials. You might have to make some adjustments to get into trials, I'm not going to lie. It just depends on your group that you play with. If your group doesn't mind you playing this way, then it shouldn't be a problem. So let's get right into it. The Stormbreaker does work best, by the way, with the Wood Elf. I have tested other races with this setup, and they don't work as good because they can't get as high of stamina recovery. You want the high stamina recovery with this build because you want to keep those resources coming in so you can keep a consistent damage output without the reliance on others to feed you resources. So being a Wood Elf works the best for it. Now, Redguard is probably second best with, I would say, either Nord or Orc, the next one, because they both get that 6% stamina increase. Redguard does definitely get the better stamina pool, but it doesn't get the better resource management because their recovery rate's not as good. Khajiit works really well with this, but they're going to have a lot less stamina pool, and you have to have Undaunted with them for them to work. Now, you're going to notice my weapon damage is kind of low. Don't be afraid of the weapon damage being kind of low. You can still break almost 4K with it, and you don't even need that high of weapon damage to do dungeons and trials. That's just people wanting the best numbers. So the resistance levels on this build are really good. It's not going to be that good because we're actually going to be a lot less, and I'll explain that in a minute. Down here we do have major savagery on the two-handed bar, but when we switch we lose it. In fact, we lose a few things. The reason we lose major savagery is because we only have expert hunter on our two-handed side. We are using dubious Cameron Throne as food because it gives the best recovery rate on stamina, and you want that high stamina recovery rate for this build to work really well. Alright, let's get in and take a look at the gear. On the gear, we are still running the Stormfist. I haven't gotten enough of the crystals yet to change this to Divines or this to Divines. So I'm still off on these things, guys. If I had both of these at Divines, my crit chance on this front bar would actually be 50%. Actually, it'd be higher than 50%. It'd be like 55. We are running Nirnhond now. You can still use the Stormmaster set, and it works just as good. The difference between Stormmaster and Hunting's Rage damage-wise, when in comparison with the rest of the gear, is literally side by side, almost exact in damage. I've tested it 100 different ways, and no matter what, when I do my rotation, I always end up with the same amount of damage. But you have to start with a heavy attack if you wear the Stormmaster. This, you don't have to worry about heavy attack. You can just start with the bow. Just go right into your rotation, do that thing. Now, if you want more DPS out of this build, I'm going to tell you now. When I get to the skills, there's some things you're going to want to change. Alright, so we are running Stormmasters. I still have my gear set up to where I'm running the Hunting's Rage weapons. You don't have to do that. You can go 5 full Huntings if you want. The reason I have the Huntings in that was because I have a Lucky's belt. So I do need to get that changed out, like ASAP. But for now, I'm happy with it. I'm fine. Next up, I do still run a 3-piece agility. Now, you can run a different 3-piece jewelry, but to be honest, the best thing you're going to be able to get in there is going to be something that gives you stamina or crit with 5% dungeon damage to dungeon monsters. That's the best you're going to get in there. Anything else is just meh. This works the best because it offers the higher weapon damage on that 3-piece part. On the 2-piece part, it's that higher stamina that you're looking for. So moving on, the weapon is still sharpened on the front bar. I've tried Nernhoned, I've tried everything else. Nernhoned works good. It does give you about the same damage, but you have to adjust what you lose here in sharpen into your champion points. Next up, we are running on the back bar. We are running a bow of an infused bow. The reason an infused bow is because we have weapon damage in there. Remember, we have a lower weapon damage. You want to get a burst of weapon damage. So I'm going to show you guys what happens when you buff up with this. Our weapon damage goes to 3,028. When you include the 400 and something into this, you get almost, now I'm going to say almost, 3,600 weapon damage. So you get close to 4K, not quite 4K. But if you're running with somebody who has spell power cure, you are going to be over 4K weapon damage. And really, you don't even need that high of weapon damage still to do the dungeons and trials. It's all dependent on your group makeup and what your group wants. If your group doesn't mind you playing this build, it'll work fine. Alright, let's get this continued on. The jewelry, you want to use all weapon damage. And the reason why is to get the greater amount of weapon damage. Now remember, you are running Stormfist, which has stamina recovery on it. Hunting's Rage does not, and neither does this. So most of your recovery rate is coming from just this one helm and the fact that you're a Wood Elf. Now the reason you want the high stamina recovery is because of the use of abilities. Whenever you use an ability, you want to have a portion of the cost coming back to you, so that way you can keep up a more consistent rotation and have less heavy attacks. The way I run this build is I run one full bar on rotation, heavy attack. Switch bars, full rotation, or full use of the bar. Switch bars and heavy attack. I always heavy attack with my two-handed weapon. So the way the rotation would work is you'd go through your rotation, heavy attack, or from the bow, you'd do your rotation, switch bars, heavy attack, do your rotation, heavy attack. And the reason why is that way you keep a consistent amount of resources continually coming in, along with the recovery rate you have because of your skill cost. Now we're going to go take a look at the skills, and we're going to start with the back bar. We're not going to start with the front bar. On the back bar, we are using Poison Injection, Endless Hail, Critical Surge, Hurricane, Bound Armaments, and Dawnbreaker. Now, I know what you're going to say. Why do you have Dawnbreaker on the back bar? To increase the damage of my bow abilities. If you switch this out to anything else, the damage on the back bar goes way down. I don't have a Maelstrom bow. This is going to give you that same effect as having a Maelstrom bow, because it's going to increase your weapon damage of that bow by 5%. 7% to be exact, or 8% to be exact, because you are running one fighter's guild ability on your back bar. That gives you another 3% extra weapon damage. That makes that 5% into 8%, which boosts the weapon damage. The damage of your bow base is 2325. When you buff up, it is 2755. If you get the weapon damage proc, which you usually do, you're going to be sitting at almost just over 3,000. So you're going to be in a really good place for weapon damage. Now you won't be at the 3,200 that you should be for weapon damage, but you'll be close enough to getting that 3,200, which will be perfect. With Spell Power Cure, you're over 3,200. So that's why you want that. Now, when it comes to passives, just get all your passives for your class if you can. On your weapons, same thing, get your weapon passives, get your armor passives. On the world, just get Soul Magic, get these ones, because these ones are going to be your best options. Like, this is going to help you with resurrecting without a soul gem. This is going to help you keep empty soul gems full. So, and on the Fighters Guild, max it all out. Especially these three. You definitely want, well, these two you want maxed out. This one especially for the extra weapon damage. This one for the ultimate generation. Now, like I said, this isn't exactly the same as most people's builds. So, on Undaunted, make sure you have both your Undaunted passives maxed out. I don't. But that's okay, I can still get by. I know the dungeons and trials well enough, I can still do them with this build. Moving on, all racial passives maxed out. And this is, like I said, the reason why the elf is so good. 21% stamina recovery. Being a Sork, you get a 10% stamina recovery. And I can get an extra 14% out of my champion points. So that 21% now becomes 40%. Because of that 14% from my champion points. And then you add another 10% on top of that. That's a 50% increase to your stamina recovery. That's a lot. So that's it for the skills on the back bar. Now let's jump to the front bar where our two-handed is, where we're going to be spending most of our time. So on the front bar we are using Carve. This is for ultimate generation. You want that ultimate gen because you're going to be firing Dawnbreaker off as much as you can. Dawnbreaker is going to be very essential to your DPS. Next up, you're going to be using Carve, not only for its physical damage, but also the applied bleeds. It doesn't apply bleeds to one target. It applies it to multiple targets. So it's a really good one to have. It's just like Dawnbreaker. It applies to multiple targets. Next up is Wrecking Blow. You mainly use this to get the empowerment. That's it. You can spam it if you want. It does a lot of damage, but look how much it costs. 2,592. If you cut 2,592 in half, it is 2,000 or 1,200 and something points. I have a 1,400 recovery. If I use this ability, which is 2,592, this ability, which is 2,592, or this ability, which is less, I can actually use these, and when I cast this, like when I use Carve, I light attack, and when I light attack, I will be in that 2-second range, so as a portion of my resources will be coming back from that, possibly. I mean, it depends on the rotation, how it's set up, but I might be getting a portion of my resources back between this, firing this off, and getting that light attack off. If that's the case, I'm going to get a portion of these resources back. When I go into this takes 1 second to activate. So it's going to take me 1 second to activate and another second to activate a light attack afterwards. When I do that, I'm going to get a portion of these resources back. That's why we have the recovery rate so high. Is so it doesn't cost us as much to use these abilities. Now in my rotation, I do this light attack, this light attack. I skip this completely until the enemy's below 50% health. And then I go into a heavy attack. Switch bars, fire off poison injection, endless hail, and if I have to reapply it, crit surge and hurricane. Moving on, we have bound armaments. Now bound armaments has to be on both bars for a reason. It gives you increased physical resistance, which you don't really need, but it's what it does next. It increases your max stamina by 8% and your damage done with heavy attacks by 11%. This is why we have the heavy attack rotation in there mixed with the light rotation, is so you get greater damage overall in those heavy attacks. Now remember, heavy attacks are a conal attack. They do a damage in a cone in front of you. Because the two-handed has a thing where it can hit up to 3 targets from forceful. So your light and heavy attack damage, damage up to 3 other nearby enemies for 70% of the damage inflicted to your primary target. So when I hit that primary target, it's going to get hit by 100% of the damage. The ones on the side are going to get hit for 70% of the damage. The ones on the side cannot be crit. As far as I know, I think they took that out, but the main one can be crit, so these other ones can take a big chunk of damage if you hit them hard enough. And when you get that 11% extra damage on top of it and all that other stuff, it does add to this damage, that 70%. So this is why this build works the way it does, and why we want the two-handed is Sorks are really good at area of effect DPS. They're literally designed for it. whether it be stamina or magicka. This is why two-handed works so good on a stam sword. Almost better than it does on any other class. I said almost. I didn't say it does. All of them. I said almost does. And that's why we want bound armaments there, is for that 11% increase in heavy attack. On the back bar, we just want it there for that 8% stamina. The resistance is nice. Moving on, we do have Evil Hunter here to boost our crit chance when we're on this bar. Now, you can get rid of Evil Hunter, and you can put on here the, you can put Trap Beast in its place. Just move this over, bound armaments over, put Trap Beast in here, and this way you have that extra ability on the front bar to do that extra damage. You will have it in a full rotation, so you will be applying it every rotation, Trap Beast. Almost every rotation, I should say. So you want to have that there for that purpose of the 10% more damage. I just use Evil Hunter. That 10% more damage really doesn't... I mean, you see it and you know it's gone when you don't have it. But honestly, you just don't really need it if you can get by without it. And I can get by without it, so that's why I don't use Trap Beast. But if you want to put Trap Beast here, you can. Now, this build does require the essence of stamina to work really good, because you want the high crit on both bars. Now, you don't really need the weapon damage because you're going to be getting it from crit surge, but don't worry about it. You mainly want it for this front bar, because on the front bar you're not going to have as high a crit. So, it's really crazy. Alright, so moving on, we're going to move into the champion points now, and I'm going to go over the champion points. Not a whole lot has changed here, to be honest. We have 56 in the Ironclad. This increases or reduces the damage you take from direct damage by 20%. Moving on, we have 56 in the Thick Skin. This also reduces the damage we take from damage over time by 20%. We have 43 in the Hardy and 43 in the Elemental Expert. This reduces the damage you take from these types of things by 10%. Now, I've been told these aren't working as intended. This is why people are putting less points into these and more into Thick Skin and more into the other one. They do work as intended. The reason people put them in the other way is because if you look at the numbers, most people put this up to 12%, this up to 8%. They're just trading off 2%. That's it. They're still getting the same results. It's just they're using bigger numbers over here because they don't think they need points anywhere else. Moving on over here, we have 10 or 16 into Expert Defender. This gives us a 10% reduced damage from light and heavy attacks. Remember, most NPCs or non-player characters in the game, that means any mob in the game, does light and heavy attacks mostly. That includes any enemy, including bosses, mostly do light and heavy attacks in their stuff. Getting that extra 10%, this 10% stacks with this 10%. Or 20%, and with this 10%, and any other damage reduction you might have from like your racial stuff or your armor bonuses or anything like that. It stacks with all of it. This is why this is a really good one to put points into. It stacks up really well. Next up, we have 16 into Quick Recovery. This increases your healing received by 4%. Not anymore. So, moving on to the next one, we have 23 into Warlord, 16 into Sprinter, and both of these are 10% increases or reduced cost and things. This is in Break Free, this is in Sprinting. When you play this game, you got to understand, you're going to be break freeing, you're going to be sprinting, you're going to be blocking, you're going to be doing all kinds of stuff. Reducing the stamina use of those abilities is super important. It saves you resources. So that's why I put points into these as much as I do, is because it saves you a lot of resources. Alright, moving on, we have 75 into Mooncalf. This increases our stamina recovery by 14%. Remember when I was talking about it earlier? This is where you're going to get that. Next up, we have 43 into Tenacity to get 10% return on our fully charged heavy attacks. You can switch this with Mooncalf if you're playing a Red Guard. That is going to be your best bet. Have this at 75, the other one at 43. The reason why is because Red Guards have a thing where every 5 seconds they get so much back from their from their things. They can proc more return from stamina. This will help with that by having this at a higher percentage. Normally you get a base of 30% on return from your stamina or magicka, depending on the weapon. This adds another 10% to it, making it 40%. With the Red Guard's extra, it's almost like you're getting a 50%, 60%, sometimes even close to 100% more in return on your resources on that heavy attack. So that's why Red Guard can get away, like, is second best to the Wood Elf. Moving on, 56 in the tumbling. This reduces our dodge roll chance by 20%. You also get another 20% for wearing medium armor. Sorry guys, allergies. So you can get that 20% on top of 20%, so you have 40% reduced cost in dodge rolling. This saves you a ton of resources, especially in boss encounters. When you see that big AoE coming down and you know you don't have time to get out of that AoE circle, you can dodge roll out of it because you can dodge some of the attacks. So dodge rolling saves your butt. This saves your butt in resources. Moving on, I have 17 into Shade because I do play this character as a thief character in the Thieves Guild, so I like to get that extra 10% in sneak. I'm also a Wood Elf, so I get improved sneaking stuff, and then I also get improved sneak from wearing medium armor. Alright, moving on to the next tree, nothing. Into the middle tree, this is where things get interesting. We have 19 into Physical Weapon Expert. This gives us a 12% increase on our light and heavy attacks. Now this 12% adds to that 11%, making it 23%. Why do we want it at 23%? The more damage you can get overall from your character, doesn't matter whether it's light or heavy or ability damage, the more consistent damage you have going out, the better damage rotation you get. So when you see a lot of these people not using this factor in their rotation, it's not that they're giving up that damage. It means that they're going for a different type of damage, and it's all ability damage. The more you focus on ability damage and you don't focus on light and heavy attack damage, the more resources your character is going to need in the long run. This build is literally almost self-sufficient. You don't even need people with you. The resource management of this build is really well done, or really well managed out, because I set it up that way. And most of the damage that you can do is going to consist of light and heavy attacks mixed with abilities. So you want a good rotation so you get that more consistent damage in there. Next up, you have Master at Arms. You have 56% or 56 points in here, giving you a 20% increase in all direct damage abilities. Most of the abilities I'm using, the initial hit, it doesn't matter what it is, including Endless Hail, the initial hit is considered direct damage. That means the initial target hit from Endless Hail is getting hit by direct damage. So they are going to get a 20% increase in that damage. All light and heavy attacks, even the cone attacks, are considered direct damage on the initial target you're aiming for. So even my heavy attacks, the target I'm hitting, the main target I'm going after, is going to get a 20% increase, plus that 23%. That's a 43% increase in heavy attack damage to a single target. This is why it's so important. Not only is it 43%, but we get another 10% on top of that, making it a 53% increase in our damage from light and heavy attacks without critting. This is why this build works so well without high weapon damage, because it gets so many extra bonuses. Not only do I get that, but I actually have a 58% increase because I'm a stand sword. A stamina sword or any kind of sword gets a 5% increase in physical damage. All weapon damage is physical damage. So that is a 58% increase, almost 60% increase, guys. Almost more as much as a critical attack, as a critical or higher than a critical attack can give you without critting. Now you add another 80 or 70% on top of that, 60%. That's a lot of damage. That's why we have 56 points in a precise strike, is to increase our critical damage done by 20%. Normally your base is 50%, this adds another 20% on top of it, making it a 70% increase. That's a ton of damage this build can do with or without the Warrior Mana Stone. Now, if you are running the Warrior Mana Stone, you will want to run dual wield with it, and you will want to run another 5-piece set that gives you extra crit and extra weapon damage. If you wanted to, you could run like Hundings with Vicious Ophidian, or you could run Hundings with Two-Fanged Serpent, that kind of thing, to get that greater amount of DPS in there. Now, you guys are going to notice I have nothing in piercing, and the reason I don't is because with the 2,596 I get from the stuff I'm using, if I'm in a group, I've already done it and tested it. If I'm in a group where we have max penetration, I am literally only off from max penetration by 1,000 points. That 1,000 points is only literally they're only mitigating 2% of the damage I'm doing, and 2% you don't notice. I'm still doing max damage I can do, minus 2%. Next up we have Thaumaturge at 56. The reason I have 56 points with Thaumaturge is for that damage over time. Any ability I have that does damage over time, like my Carve that does a bleed, my Poison Injection, both get boosted by 20%. So that's a large increase in that damage from that damage over time, and it gets boosted even more the greater the weapon damage I have. That's why I don't want really, really high weapon damage, because I compensate with other stuff. Now, I could switch the two-handed out to Nirnhoned, like I said, but it's kind of like you don't want to trade off too much on this build. You really don't, because it can hurt you really bad. So that's why I don't run Nirnhoned, but you could if you wanted to, and you could change out these points here, guys, because you don't use a lot of damage over time. You could bring this down. You could also bring this down to 16 points and bring this down to 15%, and take all those points and dump it right into here, and you would be at almost the equivalent damage of what you're going to be doing with the way it's set up now. And I say almost. You might do a little bit more because you're getting increased piercing effect, but honestly, it's not going to be by that much of a larger amount. So let's go ahead and take a look at this build in action, because that was the end of the champion points. So the way the build's rotation work is as follows. You want to start on the back bar, and you want to start with a heavy attack if you're using Stormmasters. If you're not, you do that. You do the Poison Injection, Endless Hail. You want to make sure your Hurricane and this are up, of course, and your Crit Surge. When you switch to the front bar, automatically heavy attack, Carve, light attack, Wrecking Blow, light attack, and usually if it's a boss, you can pull it off a few rotations, before they're going to die. But you want to basically do that. You want to light attack after each of those abilities, heavy attack. If you have Trap Beast, make sure you set Trap Beast first, switch to the back bar, then hit Poison Injection. Unless you're using Stormmasters, then you want a heavy attack, then Poison Injection on the bow to start. Only to start your rotation. That way you get the most benefit out of it, because you want to keep that consistency on the Stormmasters up. Stormmasters is a really good set. It is a fantastic set, especially when you have it golded out. When you deal critical damage with a fully charged heavy attack, your light and heavy attacks deal an additional shock damage for 20 seconds. It gets impressive after a while. And that shock damage is boosted by 5% because you are a Sorc. Sorcs get a 5% increase in all shock damage. That's the other reason why on the front bar I use a shock damage glyph and not a poison damage glyph. Is because I already get a 5% increase in it. I don't get a 5% increase in poison. I get a 10%, which is good, but the damage difference is not by much. And this gives me a better chance to apply on the shock minor vulnerability or off balance. That's the reason why I keep a shop glyph on the front, because I do solo play more with this build than I do group play, to be honest. And because of that, that's the reason why. But if you're playing with a group, you definitely want to use that shot glyph, even though, there might be a 60%, uptime of minor vulnerability. This helps keep it up more closely to 70, possibly 80, even almost to 100%. So, really good thing there. Really effective, too. So that is pretty much it for the Stormbreaker, guys. It is a build that I have been working on in progress for a long time, like, you know, working on to improve and make better and all this kind of stuff. And whether a lot of people think that the build works or not, it has been tested thoroughly, guys. I've played this character in every type of content in the game, the way they are, even in PvP. And they work fine in PvP. They die really fast, but man, if I can get a good rotation off, things are dead. Players will die. So it works really good there because it already has a low crit rate. So it kind of, you know, like I said, maximum of 55% is what you're looking at. And that's wearing all divines. So it's really good, but not like super good. We are running the Thief of Mundustone, if you guys are wondering. You do want to run the Thief of Mundustone with this because you do want that higher crit rating. Because you're not going to get it without it. You're not going to have a high crit rating without the Thief of Mundustone. Unless you are running a gear set like that gives you stamina, crit, weapon damage. Or crit, stamina, weapon damage. Unless you're running something like that, you're not going to get a high enough crit to keep it consistent. So it you kind of want that extra crit there to keep that higher. And when people say, oh, well, you're not getting enough weapon damage, people were running trials with this stuff before Horns of the Reach came out. They were running builds with damage this low, weapon damage this low. This is why stamina builds were considered lower than Magicka builds, but people were still running trials with these builds like that. So they do work. And I've been running this build even in trials like this. Now you have to play really carefully with this build because it is glassy. You only have an 18,000 health. So you do have to make sure that the group you're playing with is running Warhorn. If they are not, you're going to lose out. So if you don't have it, you're going to be sitting at 32,000 stamina, so don't stress it too much with 20k health. It works out. It's pretty cool. So that's it for this build, guys. I hope that you guys liked this video. If you guys did, hit that like button. If you guys want to see more videos by me, you can hit the subscribe button. And just to let you guys know, I am going to be looking to upload some of my builds to the Foundry thing, where you can upload your, you know, like put up your information on the build, and you can like list everything out, the skills, all that kind of stuff. I am going to be looking into doing that, but it's going to be after the holidays. So it's going to be after Christmas before I start doing that. So it'll probably be with the next update that I will do that. And I will put a link in the description of all my builds from that point on to the actual written build, so you guys can see, oh, this is the build. These are the numbers. These are the things I need. This is, you know, that. So you guys get an understanding. Okay, this is the video version. This is the written version. And I'm only going to do it that way. I'm not going to set up my own website. And the reason why I'm not going to be setting up my own website for builds is because of, it's just not worth it for me in the long run to invest money into something, because I don't know how long I will stick with a game. And that's the truth. A lot of us get burned on games after a while because we've done everything so much that it's monotonous to get in and do things, unless it's new content. Or unless we want to grind out some quests or do things like that. Like I've got a lot to do with the rest of my characters outside of my Templar. So, but that's pretty much it, guys. So I want to thank you all for watching. Until next time, have a wonderful day. And this guy, we'll see y'all later. Bye.